Welcome to Let's Talk Law. I'm your host, Michelle Wargo, and I'm here to help you understand the law. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that everyone should have access to legal information. Laws affect our daily lives, but the legal system can often be confusing. That's where Let's Talk Law comes in. We have legal professionals who explain things in a way that's easy to understand, using fun and engaging videos. Our goal is to simplify legal jargon into everyday talk. Here at Community Legal Services, we believe in legal access for all. That means everyone should have access to legal knowledge and no-cost legal help when needed. So grab a snack, sit back, and join us as we explore the world of law. Together, we'll make sense of it all and empower ourselves with the knowledge we need. Welcome to Let's Talk Law. On this month's episode, we're talking about something that affects many of us, especially during hurricane season: hurricane preparedness and disaster response. Joining us in the Let's Talk Law studio is Paul Ferreira. He is managing attorney of the Disaster Legal Services Unit at Community Legal Services.
So my name is Paul Ferreira. I'm an attorney. I also served as an officer in the United States Army Reserves. In November of 2023, I retired from both the private practice of law and the Army Reserves. And in February, I joined Community Legal Services as their managing attorney of their Disaster Relief Unit. The Disaster Relief Unit provides free legal services throughout mid-Florida to those victims of disasters. A disaster in this case is a presidentially declared incident, such as a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, although that's not much of a problem in Florida, but we could even an epidemic. If the president declares it as a disaster, we are triggered. That will trigger us to take action, and we will actually embed ourselves with a FEMA disaster control center and try to help the victims of the disaster with their legal needs. And these can include helping them with their FEMA claims, helping them with their insurance claims. It's a mixed bag of law. It's not one particular set. It could be dealing with a landlord-tenant issue. Tenant wants to get back into their place and they can't. It could be a consumer issue. A victim has paid a contractor and they can't find them, can't locate them, or is having issues with them. We can give them free legal advice on how to handle that situation. If you think you have a legal issue and you need help, please just call our helpline. We'll walk you through the process, and if we can't help you, we can direct you to somebody who can.
Stay tuned. We will have more with attorney Paul Ferreira and the head of Florida's Department of Emergency Management, Kevin Guthrie, when we return. You're watching Let's Talk Law.
We are from different races,
cultures,
religions.
Our families are diverse and wonderful.
We have unique abilities.
And sometimes superpowers.
But we all have one thing in common:
the right to be free from discrimination
in obtaining and keeping our housing.
If you feel you are the victim of housing discrimination based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender, familial status, or disability, contact us.
Entertainment, information, and events. You're watching The Daily 2.
Today, more and more people are finding themselves in need of legal counsel. Fortunately for them, there are organizations that can help. Organizations like Community Legal Services. With us today is Victoria Zinn of Zinn Legal, a pro bono volunteer with CLS. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you.
Victoria, you've been an active member since 2019 with Community Legal Services. What has it meant personally to be a part of this pro bono work?
So for me personally, whenever I sit down with a client who comes to me and they're truly just at their wits' end, they don't know what to do, they can't afford an attorney, they really don't know where to turn. You can always see on their face that they're disappointed, they're worried, they're scared, they don't know who can help them, if anyone can help them. So when I sit down with them and start going over their options, and usually there are many options available to them.
So what does that mean to you to be able to provide that for someone else?
It makes me feel so incredibly good just to see the smile come across their face when they realize that they do have options and there is a way out of their situation and they have the ability to make a better life for themselves. It just makes me feel so happy to see the smile come across their face.
Victoria, there are a lot of people out there that could potentially be doing what you're doing, but maybe they don't know. So if there are some colleagues, what would you tell them about participating in pro bono work?
Absolutely get involved, even if you can only donate an hour or 2 hours here or there. It means the world of a difference to somebody. So that 1 or 2 hours that you're giving back is, it could be the difference between somebody having a better life and not having a better life. So really just any amount of time that you can give back is worth it.
Amazing work. Victoria, thank you so much. Community Legal Services provides direct legal assistance to those in need. Anyone can take advantage of the legal advice and education that Community Legal Services provides. You can do that online at clsmf.org. Till next time, I'm Megan Clementi with the Daily 2.
Everyone should have an equal opportunity to use and enjoy their home. Housing providers cannot limit you to what floor you live on or which amenities you can use in fear of endangering yourself. If you are visually impaired, you can request a reasonable accommodation or modification from your housing provider. If you feel you are the victim of housing discrimination based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender, familial status, or disability, contact us.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Law. I'm your host, Michelle Wargo. After a disaster or hurricane, it's time for recovery and response. This is where community support and legal resources come into play. Kevin Guthrie, the head of Florida Department of Emergency Management, recently joined us on Law Talk to explain what his agency does and how they can help after a disaster.
You know, when I tell people what emergency management does in Florida, I say we're kind of like the state version of FEMA, but we're not FEMA. Because people just don't know, when they think emergency management, they think FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So what we do for the majority of the time is we coordinate resources throughout the state of Florida. If a local emergency manager, local sheriff, local fire chief needs stuff, then the State Division of Emergency Management comes in and gets them that stuff. We do that for about the first 30 to 60 days of a disaster. Sometimes that's a little bit longer. But then we move into this longer extended period of time, which is what we call the long-term recovery. And we are there literally for years helping communities recover. Another thing that we do that's very important to your show here today is we actually help individual homeowners appeal decisions that have come from FEMA. If they really don't understand their paperwork, we have individuals that will actually sit down with them and actually go over that paperwork and tell them what it really means. So we run the full gamut of services. We're a full service agency, as I like to say. And we run everything from the guys jumping out of helicopters to save you right after the disaster, all the way to making sure that you get every bit of money back that you're possibly due.
So it's kind of the sexy stuff, and then the the stuff that has to get done, the not so sexy legal stuff, right?
It can be, right? So you talk about this resource that that homeowners can have that can help them with FEMA. Just tell us a little bit about even right after a disaster, and then maybe more of a long term. What are the most common issues you see?
I think the most common issues we see is people get frustrated with the process because you're going to have a lot of federal alphabet soup, and you're going to have some state individuals. You're going to have nonprofits like the American Red Cross coming in and doing a damage assessment. Everybody does their own individual damage assessment, talks to the homeowner. Homeowner's going to be doing that 3, 4, 5 times in the middle of a disaster. I'd love to be able to consolidate that, but bureaucratic red tape doesn't allow us to get that done because of data sharing in between the agencies. But what's very, very important in the first 60 days of a disaster is any homeowner, renter, anybody that's been impacted by that disaster needs to register with FEMA if FEMA has declared what we call an individual assistance disaster declaration. So when that happens, people need to immediately register with FEMA. They can do that online, they can do that on the phone, they can do that in person, but they must get registered with FEMA. From that point, we move forward to help them resolve their case. Now, one thing I do want to point out is FEMA is not an insurance gap agency. The average homeowner in the state of Florida or renter gets about $4,000 to $5,000 from FEMA. Even if they max out that benefit is only about $75,000 to $80,000. You can't rebuild your life on $75,000 to $80,000. So again, I want to make sure people know the average payout's about $5,000 that you're going to get from FEMA. But what we want to make sure is that you get everything that you can through that program that the governor and first lady rolled out for the first time in Hurricane Idalia.
And when we think about after a storm, because I think when you think about when like a storm comes in or a natural disaster of any kind, you're really thinking about your safety first. You're securing your home, you're securing your family, you're making sure we have everything we need. Okay, we've got a tarp now on the roof, we've got a generator going. What you're not thinking about is, what am I going to need to preserve? What am I going to need to do 3 months now, 6 months down the line? And that is, and again, it's not the time to be thinking about that, but that is critically important.
Yeah, we recommend having a checklist. Just like you prepare to leave and evacuate your house, when you come back and you have damage, you need to basically stop for just a second, prepare what it is that you need to do. You need to call FEMA and get registered. If there's any other programs with nonprofits like the Red Cross, you need to get registered with their programs. But then you need to start, to your point, how do I preserve the documentation that I'm going to need for the next 5-10 years? So take photographs of your property, take video of your property, open up the cabinets, look at everything that's on the shelves inside your property. It's not just the exterior. You need to do the exterior, you need to go into the interior, and then you start moving forward. Call your insurance company if you have insurance. One of the things we really want to make sure people take away from previous hurricane seasons, especially with insurance right now, is if you're, like my father, you're 78 years old and you can't necessarily afford insurance on your full home, what can you afford? A contents policy at $35,000, $40,000 for the contents of your home only costs about $200 to $300 a year. That's a much bigger savings than the other. And at least now you've got something to replace the contents of your home if you cannot replace your entire home.
Hurricane season is in full force. Director Guthrie has a list of things that we should be doing now to prepare before the next storm.
Things that they should be doing now, they could go to our website and get our basic preparedness guide, which is floridadisaster.org/guide. But then when it comes to those, to your point, that longer term recovery, people need to know first of all, it is long-term recovery. It is long-term to get solutions for your situations. We still have people inside of Hurricane Michael, inside of Hurricane Irma, inside of Hurricane Ian that are still living in either a travel trailer or some non-permanent structure. The more complicated and complex your situation is, again, you had no insurance, maybe there was a title problem with the property. We see this a lot, especially over in the Panhandle, where they're generational properties and they're passed down and they need legal assistance to work through that because nobody really knows where the title was from the 1800s. Those are problems that we have to solve in the long term. So the more complicated and complex your situation, the longer it is going to take to get that done. Again, specific to this show is you may need the services of a lawyer. You may need to look, if you don't have an attorney, can you find one through legal aid? Can you contact the Florida Division of Emergency Management and let us help you get into a program, maybe through the Florida Bar Association, where they have some of their junior attorneys that give aid pro bono. So those are things that, again, the longer, the more complicated and complex, I want people to understand. That is not going to go over. That's not going to go away overnight. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a multi-month, multi-year problem.
Yeah, and you talked about titles and things like that, but also I would assume leases, right? I mean, because something happens after a storm, you don't know what your rights are, and an attorney can't even tell you if they can't read the lease.
Yeah, I will definitely tell you, some of our renters in Florida are the hardest to serve because some again, the lower the income, people are doing cash transactions with no formal lease, and if you get a landlord that just doesn't do the right thing per law, and they're doing this cash month-to-month lease, that person is often out on their ear with absolutely nothing at the end of the day, and they have very, very little legal recourse. So again, if you are in a rental situation, again, I'm not the attorney, but I would say make sure you have a rental agreement, make sure you have a lease agreement, look at that lease agreement. In Florida, what happens if I'm impacted by a disaster? Is that in that lease anywhere? Is there a paragraph that says that this individual is going to try to, or your landlord may try to get you into another property that they have in the same general area? That'd be a really great clause to look for. If you don't have that, see what that landlord may have in inventory elsewhere inside that county or inside the state. So those are all things that people need to be looking for, but they need to make sure that they have a lease that's contractual, that's binding, that an attorney can work with if we have to go to that route.
And they have a copy of it with them pre-storm, yeah.
Right, they need to have a copy of it with them.
I know it can be hard too for renters because as opposed to a homeowner where you own the property, you can do what you want to secure it, secure your belongings. If you're a renter, you may not have the legal authority to board up the windows or to do things like that. And so at the same time, you're navigating some of these things on the front end where you may need to reach out to somebody and just be like, okay, I can't board up my windows. Where do I go from here?
Right.
No, I agree. And when you're having conversation with your landlord in those cases, again, not an attorney. Yeah. I know we have one sitting next to us, but I would highly recommend put that stuff in writing. Yeah. As you're communicating with your landlord, do it in an email that says, this is not covered in our lease. Do you want me to cover the windows? Do you want me? What protective actions do you want me to take on the house? Are you going to get reimbursed for those actions? Because sometimes a failure to act may open up a door to some type of legal proceeding down the road if you the renter did not do something to act and stop something from happening.
As Director Guthrie just mentioned, having the proper paperwork is key to knowing how to act when disaster strikes. Paul is back with more information on other important documents that we should all have before a storm.
What you should be doing when you're preparing an emergency disaster kit is thinking about your legal documents and including them, adding them to that kit. You want to take those documents with you. You want to protect them, take them all with you. If you have a power of attorney, take that with you. If you have your ID card, your driver's licenses, your social security card, if it's just an ID card, pack that, protect it, and make sure you take it with you. Don't leave it behind. Policies of insurance with the company name on it and a number for you to call, and most importantly, the policy number so you can reference it when you call in and make a claim. Anything else that also bank account statements, anything, whether you have a list of them or you bring the actual last statement with you that has your bank account, the bank account number and the location of the bank.
We are there to help, and and I don't want the cliche that says, we're from the government and we're here to help. But one thing that I'll depart a little bit from the governor here and go to the First Lady. The First Lady is passionate about helping the citizens of the state of Florida, as well as the governor. But she has a system called the Hope Florida, and when we have disasters, she puts Hope navigators into communities. These are people that can give individuals white glove service that will help them navigate the processes of a disaster and help them connect to the resources that are available, such as your program or other programs that we have in the state. And that's very, very important because it is overwhelming, the amount of stuff that that happens in a disaster. And it's just one little facet of the thousands of things that we do inside of emergency management, but it is very, very important to help that homeowner, to help that renter get back on their feet after a disaster.
Sam was recently prescribed an emotional support animal by her doctor. Sam's housing provider has a no pet policy. She was informed that she could have her animal within certain restrictions and pay a pet deposit. Knowing this is a violation of the Federal Fair Housing Act, Sam filed a complaint.
If you feel you are the victim of housing discrimination based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender, familial status, or disability, contact us.
Community Legal Services is a nonprofit law firm that provides legal assistance and representation to low-income and vulnerable people in Central Florida. One case I can recall was a low-income woman. She was elderly, she was disabled, and she had been living in a home for 13 years that she did not own. The home had been abandoned by the previous owner, and so this woman had been doing all the things that she needed to do under the law in order to take legal ownership of the property. She was fixing it up, she had been paying the taxes, she had been doing all the things to kind of defend her potential ability to own this home. And while the law requires it to go on for 7 years, she did it for 13 years through 2 different changes in the statute. When I got involved, I first talked to the property appraiser and they confirmed that she had met all the legal requirements. Then I convinced the building department to go ahead and issue a permit under the circumstances because she would soon have title to the home. And then we initiated a case effectively to get the state to recognize her ownership of the home based on meeting all the requirements. A lot of nonprofits, are focused on meeting basic needs. They're giving people fish. And then there are nonprofits that really focus on how do we expand people's resources, how do we teach them effectively how to fish, to use the analogy. What I think Community Legal Services does is it really helps them secure their place in the pond and access to a fishing pole. We want people to know their rights, we want people to understand those pieces, but ultimately speaking, we also want to make sure that they have access to the pond, that they have the ability to use a fishing pole and they're not being taken advantage of in that effort. And that's why we believe in this idea that everybody should have access to legal aid. One of our taglines is legal aid for all. But it's incumbent upon the entire community, businesses and donors, volunteers, to ensure that all of these life's challenges can get handled through pro bono. Really, when you get down to the theoretical concepts of it, in the military, you're there to defend the American way of life and freedom, and that includes the system of government. When you look at it from a courtroom perspective, the judicial system is one of our 3 branches of government. And so in order for that to work, you have to have the intermediaries that link the people to the judicial system, which are the lawyers. And if not every citizen or not every resident in a particular area has the ability to reach out to those lawyers and get advice and get representation and really get their case right, then that's an entire part of the population that don't have access to one of the branches of government. So while we do have about 60 lawyers on staff that take cases, the real heroes in this are the volunteers. In the profession of law, there's a duty to serve the public. That's part of what makes it a profession. And this organization reaches out to lawyers all across the service area and helps them meet that duty by providing them opportunities to take cases. This last year, Tim Moran is one of our volunteer attorneys. He won the Tobias Simon Award, which is the highest award that the state of Florida can give to a volunteer attorney for their work. Tim Moran lives, breathes the duty of professionalism and service to the community that is incumbent in being a member of the Florida Bar. And I can't think of any better example of what every attorney should strive to be. That's absolutely the right thing to do. It's inherent in the profession. It is something that when lawyers took the oath that they committed to, not just as an obligation, but as a way of life. We cover basically any of those basic human needs you're looking for. If you're interested in helping the homeless, we do that. If you're interested in helping the hungry, we do that. If you're interested in people that don't have health care, we help with that. If you're interested in taking care of kids, we do that. If you're interested in people that have issues related to domestic violence, we do that. Veterans, we do that. Anything that you can think of pretty much that is a charitable cause, legal services in some way, shape, or form impacts that cause.
The property manager persistently came on to me. He offered me free rent in exchange for favors and threatened to evict me if I refused.
I am afraid that he has a master key and lets himself in anytime he wants. As a single parent with young children, I can't afford to leave.
Sexual harassment is against the law. If you feel like you are the victim of housing-related sexual harassment, you are not alone. Contact us today.
Once a storm rolls through or a disaster is declared, there are often resources available. Resources like FEMA. The Federal Emergency Management Agency often provides disaster relief assistance. You can apply for aid to help cover temporary housing, repairs, and other critical needs. For more information, visit FEMA's website at fema.gov or call their helpline. Local governments and nonprofit organizations also offer support, so don't hesitate to reach out for help. To recap what we've heard today, hurricanes and other disasters can be incredibly destructive, and knowing how to prepare can make all the difference. You want to make sure that you have an emergency kit ready to go that includes non-perishable food and water for at least 3 days, medications and medical supplies, important documents like insurance papers, lease agreements, mortgage information, contracts, your will, power of attorney, and your identification card, whether it's a driver's license, ID card, or passport, flashlights, batteries, and a first aid kit, and cash in case ATMs and card readers aren't working. During the hurricane, remember these safety tips. Stay inside and away from windows. Use flashlights instead of candles to avoid fire hazards. Keep your emergency kit close. Once the storm has passed, the first priority is safety. Avoid downed power lines and flooded areas, and listen to authorities before returning home if you evacuated. Preparation and knowing your resources are key to weathering a hurricane safely. By taking these steps, you can protect yourself, your loved ones, and your property. We hope you've enjoyed this month's episode of Let's Talk Law, your go-to guide to the legal world. Until next time, I'm Michelle Wargo.
Facing eviction, at risk of foreclosure, or facing other housing issues, know your rights. Community Legal Services of Mid-Florida is a nonprofit that believes in legal aid for all. Visit clsmf.org to learn more. Community Legal Services, legal aid for all. It's hurricane season again. Know your rights before the next disaster strikes. At Community Legal Services, we help hurricane victims by providing no-cost legal services for housing, insurance disputes, debt collection, foreclosures, and more. Be prepared. Visit clsmf.org.
What are you supposed to do when the world is crashing down on you?
I don't know. I'm so sorry. We have options, and we can help.
Protecting families, their health and livelihoods, all at no cost. Community Legal Services, legal access for all.